You can continue.
Yeah. Hi. Again, welcome to this lecture. This is the LPS course, and we are continuing with looking at programming in TK, Tcl TK. We covered all the Tcl functions and how to write Tcl procedures, Tcl code. Now we are looking into the TK functionality. We started last time, last lecture. We discussed some of the key elements in TK. We kind of went through like some basic commands, and then we also like talked about the packer that is available. That is how to pack the widgets basically. So today we will be looking more into the TK stuff. Let's start. So today we are going to talk about bindings essentially. So the bindings are one of the key elements in the TK. So as you know, like I mean, TK is GUI programming. So all you are seeing is the graphical user interface essentially, which is controlled through the cursor movements and the clicks basically. Now, for any click to be effective, those wherever you are clicking, that needs to be bound to certain scripts. So today we are going to talk about the binding as to how to bind a Tcl script with user events. So here the command is bind. So the command is bind, and then here we know the window, which is the .b, and then we bind what is the event essentially. Here the event is control H essentially. So that is the event that we want to bind, and then now we are binding to a script which is in this whole thing basically. So when you press the control H, it translates into a tab, and that's through this particular binding that we can select. And then we can also use tags to select one or more windows. So in this one basically, like I mean, it's the window is .b, the widget class is a text, and all windows is all, and then we have some arbitrary string basically like foobar, and these are all the various tags that we can apply. So now how do we specify events essentially? So the specifying events is through this with this less than greater than, and then we can also declare some modifiers, which is here it's a double control, meaning like you do the control key a couple of times, and then essentially like there is a button press basically, which is the event type actually, and then you can also specify like I mean what kind of button or the key system that you want to do. So the other ones are basically like the number 3, key press, A kind of things. These are all like specifying various events. Now we can also like now do some substitutions essentially. The substitutions are essentially like I mean things that you get from the event and then you're substituting into your commands. So one type of substitution is the percentage substitution in the binding script. So you can get coordinates from events, and the coordinates are in percentage x and percentage y. And if you want to get the window, that is percentage uppercase W, and then you can also get a character from an event, which is percentage A, and then there are many more which we will talk about. So here some of this one of the examples here. Again, this is the particular window, and here it's B1 motion basically, and here what we do is basically it's and this is the button press basically motion. We move to that XY essentially. So this is one of the events that we can say. And then now for another window there is a key press basically, then we insert the character that is defined by reading that the key press itself. So if you press F, this is substituted with F. If you press R, this is substituted with R. Things like that. So that comes up essentially. And then here we say like all, as you can see basically like the previous one we noted that all windows is basically like that's for all. So for all of them, if you type help, that opens the help window. So these are some of the examples that we can see as to how to bind scripts. So now we will be looking at this in a much more details anyway. So now the binding order essentially. So what happens when you have multiple bindings that is matching one event? What takes precedence over what? So these are the ones that we need to worry about in a graphical setup. In a regular programming setup, everything is executed one by one. As you know, Tcl is an interpreted language, so every line is executed one after the other. But in a graphical motion, many events are happening at the same time. So and then these what happens when you have like the multiple bindings match one particular event. So you can have like for example here A, and then you can also have let's say like bind all key press. So when you press the key, whether this is triggered, which is triggered, and how it is triggered. So so there are various things that we can do. One is we can say like it's one binding triggers per tag. Most specific binding this one. There are also like there's a default order of tags basically, which is essentially like first it goes to the widget, then to the class, then to top level, then all. So this is kind of the preference how it works. So if it matches multiple bindings, it looks for the widget binding first, then it goes into the class, then it goes to the top level, then the all thing is triggered. And then this can also change tags with the bind tags command. So this is another command. So we learned about bind, now it is bind tags. And the bind tags command actually changes one particular tags and apply to other types, other tags as well. So here like my button, and basically like when we say that it's dot b foo and then all. And then we can use break to skip the later tags. So again, one thing is basically the rules apply only to TK 4.0 and later. So that's another thing that you may want to keep in mind. So some more information about the bindings. Text and canvas widgets support bindings internally. So they associate tags with text or graphics basically. So here like a tag add foo 1.0 2.0 or create rectangle 1c 2c 1c 1c 2c 2c and then the tags foo. And then the second thing is basically like they associate bindings with the tags. Okay. So another thing to notice is that the bindings always execute at the global level. If binding created, if the binding is created in a procedure, the procedure's local variables aren't available at event time. Okay. So some more examples. So we may have to we may often want the binding script to use some information from the binding time and some from the event time. So we can use list commands to generate these scripts and use procedures to separate the event time information from the bind time information. So how do we do this? So here one typical one is essentially we say basically like bind dot x in this dot x window. We want to bind the time value and we also want to use the event time value. So when we do like we say essentially like either we use the braces or quotes. This can result in the wrong values that get called essentially or that gets applied. So the correct way to do it is basically like we define a procedure and then we bind the procedure set y basically as a list and then to this particular event. That way we ensure that actually like only the we pass this from the event into the this procedure and then the other expressions are actually coming from the bind time information. No, it is the bind time itself. So the values are set there. So the issue with this is essentially like we are only getting one value, but we have like all these 3 different values essentially, and so this is coming from the event time, and this is the bind time that is happening here. So this is like passed through the event essentially. So we don't have any control as to what the $B is going to be. So whatever we use, whether we use like so I think like you realize that this is basically the stricter form of the specification, and whereas this one allows the variable substitution. So even if you do the variable substitution and the command substitution, this value is still unknown. So this is you can get it in the bind time, but this event time value is still not set properly. So in order to do that, we actually need to pass it into a proc, and the proc is always constant on the event time, which tracks the event time. And then now when you pass the bind time value into the proc, you can get the correct answer, and that's what comes out as the value for y, and then you can continue that event mode further down. So this is again another example of how we use the list commands. So again we use here the list so that it doesn't change. Basically it still treats these two as 2 separate items. You'll see more of this kind of things in the other sections. Now the other TK commands, so we saw like bind, pack, place, things like that. These are the commands that we saw for the TK. Now the next command is going to be selection, and then the selection essentially is to select like one of the files in a group essentially. So so the selection essentially like it registers a tickle command to handle a selection request essentially. So in a selection, essentially the concept is basically that there is a given owner for a selection, and the applications are requesting the value of the selection from that owner. So you can think of it that way essentially. So so the X server itself keeps track of the ownership. The applications are informed when some other application take away the ownership. Okay, so usually the selection get goes hand in hand. Basically, the selection get um, essentially it returns the value of the current selection. So here selection get file name basically like returns that file name as the value essentially. And if that file name does not exist, basically like then this returns an error. Command itself returns an error. The other way to use this is essentially, I mean, so usually like the selection get results in a string. So this is the value that it returns. The other ways to do it is basically like selection clear, which clears whatever was selected before, like a specified selection. There is a selection handle essentially, which is essentially to define the whatever you can do a selection handle on a command. Essentially, that command basically like so that you can define that command to be the handler for the selection request. So the selection values are then passed into that that particular command. Then there are other ones are like the selection own command essentially, which gives the path name of the window that owns that particular selection. Okay, so and then the other one is issuing commands to other TK applications. So here again we can send these kind of commands essentially like so we send tgdb like and then break tk eval. This is the command that we are sending it to this particular application, and then we check for the inter PS essentially using the winfo command, and then we'll get this particular TK application what is going on basically. So we can use the socket to do the cross platform applications. This we saw in the previous lecture itself. And also we can get the information regarding the window information. The window information command is the winfo, and if you say like winfo width of this particular window, it returns what is the width of the window, and then what are the children basically. So what are the associated windows which are defined as part of the .x, or here it is the top level, so it gives you all the ones, and then it also like you can ask in specific request as to what is the window info containing this particular location, what is the window there. And for accessing the other X facilities, there is also like focus.x.y, which is the generate the keyboard focus. There's also like we can communicate with the window manager, which is WM command essentially. So title is for this window it's editing main C. So when you have the window, the title bar has editing main.c, and then we can also set the window manager for the geometry. So this is like at the top level it's 300 by 200. And then we can also like iconify, that means that basically like it generates like those minus plus and then the exit command. So if you minus it, then basically like you can go and iconify that particular window. So that those features are available for this one. And then for deleting the window, basically like we can use the destroy command. Basically like destroy.x will destroy this one. So you can mark the x as basically like, and bind that thing to destroy x or something basically. So this way you can destroy the dot x window. And then there's also like grab and grab release commands. Basically that is you can grab a particular window to do some operations, and then also you can destroy that 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 window. So now here essentially a show vars command. Basically this is displays values of one or more values, or essentially like variables, and it updates automatically. So here we specify like show vars dot vars and then name, age, SSN and phone. So it displays like the variable values, and then in that window it shows like what is the name, which is Bob, age 34, social security number, and then also has a phone number. So these are some of the other commands. So here is the show vars procedure. Basically again it takes the window and then the arguments. This is the top level. Again we name the window title as variable values, as you can see here. It's displayed here, and then we specify like what kind of frame that we want, which defines all these aspects of it, all the frame element, how that frame is defined. And then we also specify the button is basically like this is the frame is essentially like for the menu button, and then we pack that on the side top with fill, and then we specify the menu button menu file. So you can see like basically like the $W is the main window, the top level, which is the dot, and then it has one child menu and then another child file, and then this file is basically like we call it like the text as file, and then we specify its own attributes essentially, and then that has this M. So if you look at here, that's this particular window here. And then we also like now pack the thing, and then we also define here as a menu is another sub module, or the another child for this particular menu window. So and then in that one we define basically like we pack it to the left. So from the left we pack it, and then we specify basically what is the thing. So as you can see here, the file has this thing called quit. So we specify the command as label is quit, and the command is actually destroy W. And then so if you want to underline the first one, that is underline 0 here, also like underline 0. So F is underlined. So also it's also given like a shortcut basically, as you can click on F to open it and close things like that. So here the label quit, and then we say like the destroy the whole window using the destroy command, mainly so that if you say quit, it completely like erases this window. So again a quick look into this. Now we can actually add this portion of it on top of it. So we'll see. So now the next one, which is the second piece of it. So here again, so all these things are, these dot represent the previous page. So we define these things. So in this one, let me just erase some of it. So we covered this portion and this portion in this next when we define this entire procedure. So now we will go into how do we get this piece of it. So for that, first we need to define the variable values, so which is just this much. So how do we do it? Basically we again define the frame, and then so here now we have like this one as the $w.menu. Now this portion will be called, this window is called $w.bot, and then that we are packing from the bottom. So we are, and then title is anchored at the center is variable values, and then we use like which kind of font that we want to use. So and then the title is essentially like, I mean, we packed it the top of this particular box. So now let's look at the next one. So now the main thing is the show bars, we need to display the names, age, social security number, and telephone. For that we again describe few more, the when we read the args, essentially like this is where the args are coming in, and then we are going to expand that. So for each of those arguments we define the frame, which is the same as the argument. So name, so it has a name on it, and then that is set to the top. Then that has the text of whatever the argument that is passed. So for the name it is just the name. And now we also assign a value which is the text variable $i, which is it is getting it from the flow itself. Basically, there is no binding there. And then finally we have a name, basically like that is side left side, and then the value is so the way that we are assigned is basically we have now is name and the value. So we put the name first and then the value. Okay. So here the name refers to basically like $i.name, and then the $value is this $i.value, which is basically like in this case it's bot. And then this we do it for all the arguments that is specified through the show bars command. So essentially like, I mean, it does it for name, then it does it for age, and then SSN, and then finally the phone number. So I hope like, I mean, this example was clear enough how we can get to this point. Once again, so simple start with the show vars, essentially like, I mean, which is going to the .vars window, and then we want to display name, age, social security number, and phone number. So we start by specifying the top level window. The top level window is nothing but essentially it has variable values as the banner, and then in the frame we specify how the frame is being made, and then where do we put the text essentially. And then we also create another child window, which is the menu essentially. Yeah. So that menu again it becomes a button essentially, and then it has the text as file, and then we create another child window underneath it, which is called quit, which essentially gets this window out. Now once we define the top level stuff, then now we have to define all the remaining stuff. For that we build the window into two separate things basically. So we build first the variable values and then we can populate this from the flow itself. So this is something that we saw here. In this one. So basically the event time versus bind time. So in order to do that, what we need to do is first we define this particular window, which is also not very challenging. We define another child window called w.bot, w.bot, and then we define its attributes, what kind of button it has basically, and then what is the text that goes into that. Once we do that, then we populate the remaining stuff, which is what is the name, what is the age, what is the social security number and phone number, and for that we just use a for each command to generate for each one of them, like for name, for age, for SSN and phone. And the types that we want to build are essentially again we need to do another child window. The child window will be like just the name alone, then the age, then SSN, then phone. In the name one, we define two variables. One is this name itself, which is just prints whatever is assigned here, and then this one gets through the event modification. So I think like this is one example. I also want you to actually practice this more so that you can understand the concepts much better. So once you start writing the TK code, then you will be fine. You should be able to figure out all these event driven things. One of the key aspects of any Windows or graphical user interface kind of things is this event driven mode essentially. So everything is an event. When you move the mouse, it's an event, and how do you capture and how do you react to it? That's the bottom line. So now the second example that we will look into is the making a dialog box essentially. So a dialog box is mainly like a window like this, where it pops up during some program execution. It asks you for a separate one question. It asks you one question, and it has several choices, and then you can click one of them, and then that particular thing is executed. So in the TK terms, we can say that basically, so make dialog is the command name, and then $D is the window name, or sorry, .d is the window name, and now we have a title which is called file modified, and then what kind of message is this? So we tap it as like $message, so warning. And then we also have the button labels here. So each one will generate one button here. So this changes and so how does this work essentially? So at the high level, this is the command of make dialog, but underneath that, what do you have to write? It's basically it's the procedure make dialog, and it has these different things essentially, which is the window itself, its title, the text, the bitmap, and then the various arguments. So we define the top level as $W, and then we assign the title to this particular window. Then we also create some window manager protocol, basically, which is it just says basically like how do we delete this particular window. And then we define a child window, which is the $w.top, and then this child window, and then we also the child window is actually like for this top is packed at the top level at the topmost point, and then we also have a similar one for the bottom side, which is again another child window w.bot, and that goes into the bottom. And now we can also specify some label. The label is essentially the text that we grab. So here the text is like you have modified the file food.tcl. And do you wish to save your scope form? So simple command, but it takes a while before we can execute. So now once we finish basically this packing basically as the first one, now what do we do? So if you don't provide any bitmap, actually like when you provide the bitmap and the bitmap is not null, then it adds that bitmap essentially. So we have a new window called bitmap, and then we pack it towards the left side, and then it is packed on the left. It is 3 millimeter by y is 2 millimeter. So that's how this text is being displayed here. Once we finish this, then now we need to put the last bit, which is the bottom window. So for that the command is basically like set I equal to 0 for each button in the set of arguments. We create the button essentially as a child process to the main one, and then we call the button as the $but essentially as the same text format that we got. And then we also assign the command set button $w$i. So once we do that, then we need to pack basically this one, and the way that we pack is essentially 1, 2, 3 this way, and then we go into the next and grab the next button, and then finally we use the button. So here if you notice basically the buttons are either save file, discard changes, or return to return. So we do the we grab the global I mean actually like we define this button $w, and then we grab that window manager, set old focus to focus, and then we do this focus for the window, and then we just variable we do a tk wait variable button and $w, and then we destroy that window, and then focus is another command. Focus command is for the old focus, and then we just return the evaluation with the button. Okay. So in summary, creating interfaces in TK is an easy way. Basically, we can create widgets, we can arrange with the geometry managers, connect to applications and to each other. So these are all some of the key benefits of TK library. And then always, I mean, it's better basically to have a single scripting language that you can use for variety of things. So whether in to specify user interface, whether you want to, or some widgets to invoke an application, the widgets basically to communicate with each other. For communicating with outside world is another one, and then for changing anything dynamically. So in summary, yeah. So in summary, we saw like a couple of programs. Before that, we started with the key bindings. Essentially, bindings as one of the key aspects of TK. So and then the bindings essentially like we actually bind commands and to various events essentially in the bind using the bind command. So why is this useful? Essentially, this is the way that we can execute commands when user presses the any kind of keys or any interaction that the user has. We can immediately do bind that event to a particular command, and then we can execute that command. And then we went into like specifying like what kind of specific events are there, and we also understood how to do substitutions within the bindings, and then what is the order of the bindings, because multiple events can happen or an event can actually trigger multiple bindings. Now which binding gets the priority or gets the preference, that's the key thing. And then one way to do that is essentially to so it goes in the default order of the tags, essentially, that is widget followed by class followed by top level and then followed by all. So there is a hierarchy there, and that we need to keep in mind. And then essentially like we have like text and also like the canvas widgets that are that support bindings internally. So here is a text one basically, which is like the tag is already specifying internal bindings, and then for creating a rectangle we need basically the length, width, height, actually like length and width of the rectangle. So that's again through this command we can specify. Now we have like two concepts basically. There's the binding time and event time, and how do we do this essentially? Like because any script would want some information from the bind time, meaning if you are interactively selecting, and then something from the event time which is driven through the time. So how do we do that? How do we select those things? We cannot use a single modifier like we learned in Tcl programming, which is like the curly braces or the quotes. The quotes is a soft matching, or essentially it tries to replace all the variables and the command names, whereas the other one does not do it. But we cannot use both of them, so we go into an intermediate form where we use list to actually separate these items and not having to collide with each other. So once we have that list, essentially like so that is we specify here. What we need to specify inside is based on how deep you want to go essentially. And then essentially here the set y is actually a proc, which now keeps track of um, the um, the binding time information. Only like we pass this $a into that particular procedure, and that is an event driven mode, and then now you get the result, and then you can compare essentially. And then we also saw some other TK commands like selection get is one of them, and then which is essentially gives a reliable event basically like in the memory. And then when we want to issue commands to other TK applications, basically we set these two params and then run the command, and then it should be fine. And then we can also like get Windows information, that is winfo width, winfo children, winfo containing $x, things like that. And then we can also access the keyboard focus using the focus command. So the focus command essentially so they are part of the dialog boxes themselves essentially, and then so the top level window essentially has the input focus essentially, and then you can require the focus to change from one to the other. So or you can specify the keyboard to be the focus, which is using the $x $y principle or the syntax. And then we can also communicate with other window, communicate with your own window manager using the WM command, which stands for Windows Manager. And then we can destroy any window using destroy.x. And then there are some grabs essentially. Then we looked at a couple of examples. The first example being the show wars example as to how to write this. So show wars is essentially there is a procedure, and so as with any other procedure, the show wars has the variables essentially, and then the arguments. I'm sorry, the dot wars is the window, and then the arguments. So this is the window. So in this window, how do we specify things basically? Like, so we are building the whole program here. So we call this as the show wars procedure, which has the window and then the whole bunch of arguments. Again, here you can see that actually this is left as infinite list. And then now we set the top level to be the name of the window. And then we put the title as variable values. Then we generate new windows from the original one. And here, like it's called menu, and using the frame command. So this is the child one essentially, and then we can see what we can show what is the text for this one, and then what are the menus essentially. And now the menu itself can have additional child. For example, if you want to define width, basically which destroys the whole window, you can put it there. And then we also continued with that, and then we looked at the remainder of the program essentially. So here we generate another child window called dot bot, and then in the dot bot we can actually specify the variable values. Again, still it is not done. There is one more part, which is now we have to show all the various pieces of it, basically what is the user specified ones essentially, and then for each one of them we need to now go and find out from the event mode what is the value of the various variables, and then substitute those values in the main output, and then you're done. So here we specify like 2 items. So for each one in the menu, basically we define a new windows, and then we say like how to pack it and what to anchor on, and then basically these are all in terms of like the name value pairs. So the bottom ones are all like name value pairs, so that once we fetch the name, we know the what is the value. So that was one quick example, and then the other example was the make dialog box, which is again specified as make dialog dot d, then file modified $message warning, and then we save file, discard changes, and return to it. So when this dialog box opens, basically you will see that there is some message here, and then it has these 3 buttons: save file, discard changes, and return to editor. And then essentially like, so how to build it is again we have the input which is already specified, and then we define the top level window, and then we define a title for it. Then we can do like delete any kind of window, basically like which is embedded thing already there, and then that's pretty much it. So once we have this this window covered, then essentially like now what we need to do is we need to bring up the various buttons as bitmaps. So here again, like I mean, we're passing the bitmap basically, which is and then we just pack those things in. Then we want to also generate for each of the arguments we need to generate a button. So we know that the arguments are save file, discard changes, and return to editor. So for that we need to put some file for that. And now the last one essentially, which is what kind of things it will say. So we basically grab the window, and then we set the old focus to the new focus, and then focus we change to the top level window, and then we wait with a variable and for the button press, and then in that case like then we destroy the W, and then say the old focus, and then we go back to where we come from. So in summary, essentially like I mean creating interfaces with the TK is very easy. It creates widgets, and then we can arrange with the geometry manager, and then we can connect to applications and also to each other. So I think I'm going to stop at this point. We'll continue from this in the next lecture. Okay. Hey Sandeep.